welcome back to the channel. We are talking about part 2 in the Shire now. Part 2 of our Jaguar. Again, one of the early adopter Group C cars. Nonetheless, a very fine result. So join me and this little guy, Smokey. He joined me out at the track. Some of you have heard him. There he is. Some of you have heard this little guy barking every once in a while. So he decided to make an appearance on camera tonight. The big girl Pangea, she's inside. But enough about the dogs. Certainly have some bit of pace. Can't say there's the same handling. Can't say there's the same handling that I would have achieved from maybe the 956s or the 962s. There could be any number of reasons. This might not be where this car wants to land from a gear ratio perspective. A number of things could be going on, but I haven't run a 5-second lap yet. But I'm not in a terrible position running 6.2s. So out of the box, of course, you know, and just a minimal amount of tuning going at this point in time. Just seeing how that guide is handling things. Now is really the opportunity to, with no weight, no anything, you can feel the rear end of the car just swing all over the place and really see what that guide is doing for you. We're running 6.1 again. Nothing to shake a stick at, but we'll be doing just fine. We'll get this car, hopefully, you know. I think the Warsteiner 956 is in the low 5.4s, maybe 5.3s in blue. Almost unheard of for a Slot.it Group C car. But if we can get this car into the 5.5, 5.4s, that's what we're looking for. So every little bit helps, and that's not a terrible point to be at about just over 6 seconds in blue. Let's get to work and do a little bit of tuning. Now that we've got the baseline tune, we will go work on the body float. We will work on the tires. We'll get those sharp edges off, and we will work on the pod float. And we will work on the weight inside the car. We should actually pick up a little bit more action. I forgot that I had just cleaned the track and then I didn't really clean the tires after a few laps. I'm going to guess that I'm going to be able to touch the 5s. And the point that I was making was we're not considering that we're done by any means, but it's the comparator of a Group C car, an LMP car, that I would probably say a baseline tuning like this would get me into the 5s already. Go. And as I suspected immediately, I just ran a 5.93. And I am driving wickedly wild. So driving wickedly wild. So there you go. So of course, you know, I didn't expect anything less, right? I know what this gear ratio can produce in most Slot.it Group C cars. I know what the baseline tuning can do when I set the front axle appropriately, when I change the guide, when I have quick slicks on here. So ultimately, probably operator error on my part at the beginning, broadcasting to you all. So I would say we're in a fine place where most of what I expected would occur. Again, very little body float right now, just to not crank it down, and the pod absolutely has no float in it whatsoever. So this is good. This is a good thing here. You know, 8 and 8. And there you go. I'm sure that's very close to the same thing. A 5.89, nothing wrong with that. Can only go down from there. Phillips will be our best friend for the next few minutes, right? Giving the car just a moderate bit of body float. Interesting observation, maybe the attempt at, allowing this wing to have some forgiveness. It still remains extraordinarily loose. It is not something that you could say is a consequence of the body necessarily, because it's not really in line with the body post screw. It's just simply mounted in, well, again, I guess you could say a forgiving sort of environment. So we'll see just how forgiving it is. I have two Mazda 787Bs. That's all you need to know when it comes to rear wing contemplation. All right, let's see.
Yellow flag.
Certainly already helpful. As you might imagine, loosening things up, right? But there's always a fine line for those paying attention and those learning. There's a fine line. If you loosen things up too much, you're going to get slop all over the place, and then loosening things up to a point where you're actually hindering the ability, because things that rattle, they're also going to create friction. They're going to create torsional friction in the corners, all kinds of issues. So balancing that fine line between creating the ability for the car to have some forgiveness, because there is no real suspension, and overkill by just having things rattle around, right? So now we're going to start on the body. We just did the body. Now we're going to start on the pod. I'm going to go ahead at this point in time, and I'm going to go ahead and, well, I'll try and do it right in front of the camera here. I'm going to go ahead and take both of these and back them off by about, I'm going to start with just a quarter turn. On the rear ones, I'm going to go about quarter turn as much, but I'm going to anticipate that I'm going to go far more than a quarter turn eventually in the back. You just have to find the balance you're looking for.
Go.
This car's rear end very much wants to go all over the place still. So in this particular instance, I'm going to need some weight to plant this car undoubtedly, but I am liking the takeoff of the 925. There's no doubt I'm liking the takeoff of the 925. It's just going to be the ability to plant this car. It's just going to be the ability to plant this car.
Yellow flag.
See how our quick slicks are doing. Can tell the wear in. You can tell the wear in spots on the quick slicks, whether or not they're seating well on the car. These seem to be looking pretty good. And I do have a pair here that certainly still has some sharp edges, and so we'll work on that as well. I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit more work on this pod. Think about what I was feeling from a handling perspective versus what I think I might want to do next. So I made a few more adjustments to the pod. Whoa. Already starting to make major gains. We're running easy 5.7s, so that's a good sign. So we're 0.3 away from a nice place. Now, I will say this much also. This car had some pretty nice lines underneath it, and the way the body was sitting, I already had a decent bit of daylight. on this car, and I didn't really do any body float work with the Dremel on the chassis. I'm considering still coming back and doing some of that work now, right? There's not a lot of, I don't hear any clicks. But there's a little bit of something there. Nothing on this side. Again, I don't mean that. That's just a consequence of the way the body was molded, but there's a little something there on the black part of the chassis that's just placed. So instead of taking the Dremel, I might just take some sandpaper. I might just take the file, right? I don't think there's anything, you can't hear anything clicking when you're shaking it back and forth. So that's nice. That's a good thing there. All right, we'll stay here with the camera view, and I'll just show you that I did go get file, and I actually did pick up the Dremel because it's my weapon of choice here on this plastic work anyway. And I just, not that there was any real clicks before, but now it's virtually silent. So there was just a little bit. So there you go. So now we've got that taken care of. We got that out of the way. We've got even better body float than previously. And I've also knocked the edges, the sharp edges off of both of the tires. So give those a good clean roll there fast. Give them a quick roller and see what we get now. And I haven't done anything still. I'm at 8.8 still. I mean, this car is just performing as I would expect it in that 2.6, 2.7 gear ratio range as far as the torque, power, and the handling based on that. I haven't seen any adjustments needed there yet. All right, very respectable, very respectable. First couple of 5.6s, right? First couple of 5.6s there, a 5.68. Be no shame in running a 5.68 during a race, I can tell you that. Clean these tires another time or two here, just checking how they're wearing in. The tire on the left-hand side of the car, as you're looking down the car, I suppose, we'll just call it this tire, and everybody will know what I'm talking about. It receives the most wear on this track because it's the most right-hand turns and the most force the car feels is the rear tire on this side, of course. So you just want to check the wear-in points as these 44 laps in. You just want to check those wear-in points to see that even on both of them, you're getting nice wear points. That's going to be a good one. All right. So I may have done all I can so far without going to another step. So now what I'd like to do is add some tape. Add some strapping tape so that it might allow me to loosen this pod even more, but give it more flexibility with that tape, providing just a little bit of, oh gosh, I don't know if I've said it before. I don't want to use the word rigidity because we're not trying to create some rigid point, but when the chassis is just simply loosened from the motor pod, and the motor pod can fly back and forth at some point, just as we've been talking about, it's counterintuitive to keep loosening everything up and create chatter and create all kinds of things bouncing around. But the more you can create a smooth bit of float back and forth when you have that piece of tape across here, yeah, you're just adding more enhancements. So let's show this one more time on camera here. The goal of the exercise is to attach the tape to this part of the chassis to start with, and then naturally maybe just a gradual touch across the motor pod itself so that the actual travel on the track wears in the points where you want the tape to be connected. So, you can start from either side if you want to, but, you can certainly, and I'm going to hopefully hold it on camera while looking through. Of course, I laid it down crooked. Leave it to me to put it on there crooked, right? Well, I see my flaw. I think I cut my piece of tape slightly crooked. And I did, but I think I can get around that. Oh, nice, it still fit. Okay. And of course, poke some holes through there. Naturally, when you go to adjust the pod, you'll be okay. So, and I'm not going to press that down overly hard. I'm just going to make sure that it's attached to the chassis. How about bringing it back up into the camera here as I'm looking below? Make sure it's attached to the chassis rather nicely. And then we'll let that occur naturally, either with me doing this or while it's on the track.
Yeah.
And I'm really going to try and lean on it through some spots now. That was just bad driving. There's a fine line between leaning on it and bad driving, right? Well, we're running consistent 5.6s without any weight. So I'm definitely appreciative of what the tape has added, but it hasn't given me any advantage. It hasn't given me any advantage in terms of time savings just yet. Just check and see how our tires are looking still here, making sure we're clean. Seeing now what I have for body float, seeing if there's anything that can be done that is going to allow any reason to feel that we should try even more. So I'll go ahead and puncture and make those holes right now. There we go. Maybe give this guy on the top end near the guides closest to the front of the car 1/8 of a turn. 1/8 of a turn.
Yeah.
Well, now we're consistently running in the low 5.6s. Again, all of those little incremental points are starting to add up and make a difference. So now I might say, okay, well then let's go back even further on the rear pod screws. Right, we're starting to get that nice bit of assistance from the tape and it's settling in where it wants to be. So now I'll kind of just make sure very lightly. I'm not pressing into it. I'm just running my fingers across it very lightly to make sure now we're in contact with the pod. And I'll come back another, oh gosh, 1/8 of a turn here.
Yeah.
Well, and there's our first 5.8. There's our first 5.8, our first 5.5, and I tried to de-slot myself over there, going around the back stretch through the little monitor spot where it kinks a little bit. So there you go. We need weight on the car now. so we don't have that kind of chatter when we go through some of the spots where we want to push through. And the weight's going to allow the car to travel much more smoothly through some of those through some of those spots. We've got an opportunity. We've got an opportunity to put a piece of weight or a magnet here, even though the magnet does absolutely nothing on this track, of course. We don't have magnet traction here. That is copper tinned braid. And so I could put a magnet there if I have any left. That's the really old magnet, the old school one that doesn't even have the two ridges on both sides. So I may be better off not even dealing with that, or taking a small piece of tape, golf tape, lead weight, whatever, and putting it in there if I so choose, and gluing it down through the middle. But definitely we're going to get some weight in the front of the car and hope the front of the car stay much more planted as well. So as I made my way through the final stages of the tune, checked the guide, made sure that I had a nice rounded edge, as that was a universal guide. Just checking here also to make sure that I had the right space with the spacers, making sure we're getting good action with the front axle, making sure we've lubed it as well. Also, where the spacers are put in, must have gotten a little drop on there, but you can see that everything looks good there. We talked about gluing in the motor wires, ensuring that there was lube on the back as well. And you can see that wear-in pattern that I mentioned, making sure that we're not riding, uneven, and that there's a good wear pattern on those quick slick tires at that point in time. So now, at this point, what was left to do was weigh the car. When we're doing weight, we want to get a good understanding of what everything weighs, including those screws. And so when I look at this and I think to myself, okay, I should not be adding anywhere near more than maybe 5%, if that, to the total weight of the car. We want to maintain the balance of the car. And in this particular case, I was just checking for wheelbase comparators for the 956. And so you can see the big opportunity right there in the front. And you can see the opportunity in the back. So I do believe, well, I know, I definitely put a magnet in the back there, even if I don't show it on here. Eventually, I do have a magnet on this car. And I'm just going to take it through the paces here. I was figuring out whether or not I wanted to use the thicker weight or the thinner weight. Definitely recommend doing this by caliper if you have the ability to. There's every reason to make exact measurements so that you can cut a piece and fit it directly in there. That is definitely a nice feature, by the way, of those little markings on the plastic that allowed me inside the pod to get an exact cut. In this particular case, I did choose to go with the thinner lead. The car seems to be a little bit happy in the rear end compared to some of the 956s, but a lot of the Group C cars are happy in the rear end anyway. Some of them sit better than others, but in this case, I needed to get the front of the car to plant as well so it didn't launch up out of the slot. So got a nice fit right there, and going ahead and putting that piece in. And once that piece is in, I do believe I may not have shown that I did actually add the magnet in afterwards, because I'm looking now and I can see that the magnet is still not in there. All right, well, these are the moments that I really look forward to here, because short of me adding a little bit more weight, this is really what it comes down to right here.
Yeah.
Whew, bit of a wild drive there. Bit of a wild ride right there. Well, I can't say. The jury's still out on this one, to be honest. I'm not too thrilled with the rear end, and I may have just gotten a lucky lap running that 5.56. Now I'm just talking and not really paying as much attention to driving, but
Yellow flag.
it would tend to tell me that this would be a middle of the pack runner if it was not going to get any better than this, which wouldn't be a terrible thing. But of course, I don't give up that easily. Certainly got some nice twitchy takeoff. It leaves a little bit to be desired in the corners as far as handling goes. But I'm not sure, maybe other than trying to get the rear end to settle down a little bit more with a magnet or some weight in the rear end, this may be where this car lands. Oh, there's our first D slot. There's our first D slot in 83 laps. That's me getting impatient. That is absolutely me getting impatient, wanting more out of the car. Yeah, I'm just consistently running 5.61. Well, there's a 5.57, but I had to really just get that perfect to get that 5.57. So,
Yellow flag.
Yeah, okay. All right, so as it turns out, a very competitive car, right? Again, sometimes you just have to also wait and see. One of the things that we probably don't talk about as much in the slot car world, but it's definitely widely known, and it's just like anything else, break-in. Break-in period is so important, right? The tuning is part of the break-in of a car, but once you get it to handling the way that you want it to, yes, tunes can sometimes fall apart. Let's not ignore that. And sometimes that can be because of accidents and other things like that. But most of the time, if you got your tune right, the car tends to get a little bit faster. You're going to gain a half a tenth, a full tenth, maybe even more. Maybe you start to adjust the brake and the sensitivity and other settings that maybe you have on your controller. Maybe you have, you have a DeFalco controller that has more adjustments than a Professor Motor controller. But you start to get more comfortable with the car gets more comfortable with you. That is really a thing. And that's what can happen. So I'm not disappointed by any stretch of the imagination with this car. Is it as fast as that bird of prey Porsche? No, it is not as fast as that 956. That car, being very thankful for the way that car turned out, no doubt about it. But I'm thankful for the way that this car turned out as well. So they all bring something different to the table. They're all exciting to look at. If we all love our Group C cars or any race car for that matter. So very happy the way that it turned out, and check out some of these other videos that we have for tuning, or you can check out a race video as well if you'd like. And if you like the channel, hey, subscribe, share, comment, like it, and turn on that notification, or Gandalf the J, she's going to poke you.
If you don't subscribe to Hubble Racing, I'll poke you with my staff. Pokey, pokey, pokey.
She will poke you with her staff.
Pokey!